Hello, Ragnon here, and today in our uh, video as part of our Eve tutorial series, I'd like to look at something that's uh, one of the more confusing parts of Eve at first, and that is how modules are categorized. So in previous videos we kind of looked at how to fit our ships, and we even put a new gun on. As you play Eve longer, you might get things that drop from pirates, or you might be wanting to buy things on the market to upgrade your ship or get new ships, and you might be confused by the naming system of weapons. Each weapon, I'm going to go ahead and unequip this so we can see it by itself. This gun is called 125mm Gatling Autocannon 1. There are four, I believe, different types of turrets, guns in Eve. There are projectile weapons, which shoot projectiles. They have decent tracking. Each type of gun has a long-range version and a short-range version. So there's projectile weapons, which the Minmatar specialize in. The autocannons are short-range, whereas the artillery guns are much longer range. The autocannons have very good tracking, which means that ships that are going around your ship very fast, you'll be able to track them. You're not going to miss nearly as much as you would with a slower tracking weapon. And they fire much faster, but they do less damage per shot. The artillery fire much slower. They have a much greater range, and they have worse tracking, so they're worse up close, but they're much better at far range. Those are the two versions of projectile weapons. There's also hybrid weapons, which is what the Galente ships specialize in. Hybrid weapons, these are the Galente ships. Hybrid weapons have better tracking, I believe, than projectile weapons, and they're fired in a similar way. There's blasters, which are fit for very, very close range, and then there's railguns, which are made to fire at very, very far range. The next type of weapon is missiles. Missiles are what the Caldari specialize in. Let's do new ship today. Let's do the Raven. Missiles will always hit, but their damage depends on a lot of different factors. They're actually very complicated. We're not going to talk about them too much, but they fire at two different ranges. The rockets shoot very short range, and then the naming system on rockets is a little bit more complex, but each tier, I mean, not the right word, each size of ship has two weapons. So for example, frigates have rockets, which are very short range, and light missiles, which are very long range. Cruisers have rapid light missile launchers, which are very close range and they shoot very quickly, or they have heavy missile launchers, which are much longer range, and so on and so forth. Battleships have torpedoes, which are very, very short range but very powerful, and cruise missiles, which are some of the longest range weapons in the game. And they each have their benefits. Last type of weapon is energy weapons, lasers. Energy turrets also have a long range and a short range version. There's the pulse, which is the short range version, which does a lot of damage up close, and then the beams, which is much longer range. So that is the four different types of turret modules. So let's look at the autocannon. If I right click on this and show info, I can see all the information about it, like the tracking speed and the fall off, which is the range, the optimal range. Over here on the variations tab, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. The variations tab shows the different names of this type of gun. The most basic version is called the Meta 1. The meta level, let's see if I can find it here. That's not going to say it. It'll say it on the other ones. The meta level has to do with the version of this particular type of gun. As we move up in meta levels, META, That changes how effective that weapon is for this tier type of weapon. Um, there are 4 different meta levels. There's 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. I guess that's technically 5. Um, as we move down the list, you'll notice this light carbine. If we go to attributes, this is meta level 1. They are slightly easier to fit and they're a little bit more effective, but they're also pricier because they don't require better skills to fly, to fit and use. The best is called the Scout. So that, if we look at it, is a meta level 4. It does more damage, it has a better range, but they are more expensive, so you don't want to lose them. That's all the level Tech 1 versions. So the naming system is pretty complex, and the easiest way I can say is to right-click on something and go to variations and memorize the most basic names of them, like autocannon, and then the variations. The more you see it, like for example, I'd see a Scout autocannon, and I'd know, oh, that's a Meta 4, and I could sell it for a lot of money, just because I've played for a little bit longer. But that's how the Tech 1 versions are categorized. There's different meta levels, and as you go up in meta levels, they're a little bit easier to fit, they're a little bit more effective, and they are more expensive. Now, if you want the really good stuff, that's the Tech 2. They're actually cheaper than the meta level 4. They're more effective. I think they're a little harder to fit on your ships because they require more power grid and CPU, which we'll talk about later, but they are harder to fit, and they're actually cheaper. You say, well, they sound like they're better in any way. Every way, why wouldn't I just use them right off the bat? Well, they require lots of skills to be able to fly, and they're difficult to make. So, for example, I would need to train for over 6 days in order to use this one type of gun. After I've trained those 6 days, then I can fit this no problem onto my ship and use it. Some Tech 2 modules are more expensive than the metas, and some are not. So it all depends on what's going on with the market and how much demand there is, and kind of fluctuates. But big thing that you can remember for Tech 2 versions of the weapons is that they require a lot of skills to use, and they are what you're aiming for. If you're not willing to train up the skills to use Tech 2, or you want to fly a really fancy, expensive ship, then you can get the faction versions of the weapons. The faction versions of the weapons are as good, if not better, than the Tech 2, and they don't require the skills that Tech 2 has. The catch is they are extremely expensive, because some faction modules, they're not too expensive, but some of them are very expensive because they only drop off of certain type of NPCs that are very rare spawns, and even when they spawn, they don't have a chance to drop it. So they're very rare, and they sell for a lot of money. They can be more effective than the Tech 2s, but you're talking the kind of amount of money that you're going to have a big target painted over your head, and somebody's going to want to kill you so that they have the satisfaction of blowing up that amount of money. So that's basically how the game categorizes weapons. And if we go over here to the regional market, you can see, for example, let's get a I don't know. Let's get a missile launcher. Or let's do something easier. Let's do a shield booster. So ship equipment. And let's go down here to all the shield modules. And let's look at shield boosters. I know there's a lot of items here, and it's pretty intimidating at first, but as you get more familiar with the game, you'll know what each of these does and what their purpose is. It's just kind of it's a big learning curve, and it's a very difficult game to learn, but I wouldn't trade the learning experience that I had for anything. It's such a fun game to learn because it's so big. Anyways, let's look at the small shield boosters. These are like things that repair your shields, essentially. This shows the different versions of this small shield booster. All of these are the same type of item, but their different qualities. So there's the civilian shield booster. This is as cheap as it gets. It's very easy to fit, and it's pathetic. It barely does anything. That's like the rookie ship equivalent of the module. Outside of like getting one for free or needing something extremely cheap, I wouldn't recommend using these. Then there's the basic version. We're going to skip the ancillary. Small Shield Booster 1. This is the basic meta 0 level of it. If we click on it and go to variations, we can see all the different variations of this type of module. So there's Small Shield, Converse, Neutron, Clarity, and C5L Emergency Shield Overlord. Crazy name, but all you have to do is click on the one that's furthest down, go to Tributes, and make sure it is the meta level 4. That means it's the best out of the Tech 1 levels. The prices in the station are probably going to make me a liar, but yeah. So compared to the basic one, this is the basic one, Small Shield Booster 1, and it sells for 21,549 ISK. The Meta 4 is a little bit better. You'll notice it's easier to fit. It's got 2 power grid and 25 CPU versus 2 power grid and 21 CPU. So it's easier to fit, it's more expensive, and it performs a little bit better. We haven't at this point mentioned what power grid and CPU is, but basically on your ship you have 2 different resources that are used up when you fit something to your ship. So let's put this gun on. This gun, well, it's very easy to fit, but this gun takes up 27.8 power grid. I'm sorry, it takes up 1 power grid because we still have 27.8 out of 28 left, and it takes up a little under 3 CPU. So this is actually very easy to fit onto the ship. But as you fit more stuff onto the ship, you'll notice that these bars start to fill up. Every ship has a certain amount of power grid and CPU by default, and as you fit modules to the ship, you might not be able to fit stuff in all these slots, or you might have to use a different version of that item because your ship might be able to not be able to fit it all. If you fit a module to the ship and it doesn't have enough power grid or CPU to run it, you can still put it on the ship. It'll just be offline. It won't work. So as you fit more stuff, that's what I was talking about when I say power grid or CPU. All right, wrapping up the section on modules. That's what the Meta 1, the Tech 1 versions are. There's Meta 0 through Meta 4. As you move up in meta levels, they get more expensive, but they're easier to fit, and they work better. And you don't need the skills. Once you can fit the basic one, the Meta 0, you can fit the Meta 4s. If you want better stuff, then you train the skills up to get the Tech 2 versions. And if you are impatient, or you want stuff that's even better than the Tech 2s, then you waste millions, or maybe you waste millions and millions of ISK to get the faction or Dead Space stuff. So, but to start off, fly cheap. Number 1 rule in EVE is don't fly anything you can't afford to lose. So if you're scared undocking it, don't fly it. Fly something else. You'll get there. All right, so that's the section on the modules. This section is very complicated. So there's a lot of items in the game. And this is just the modules. This isn't talking about ships or implants or ship rigs or anything like that. So this is just kind of a basic way that you can understand the names. If you're confused on anything, right-click on it. There we go. Right-click on it and look at the variations and see where it falls within this Tech 1 scheme. So there's a lot of crazy names, but this is the easiest way it's broken down. If you have any other questions, please leave a comment on the video and I'll do my best to reply to it. But I think that's enough information to wrap up this video. We're going to look at some other topics in the next one. Thanks for watching.